Let me tell you something about ambition. Real ambition. Not the kind you talk about at dinner parties, not the kind you put in a LinkedIn bio between your job title and your list of hobbies. I mean the kind of ambition that looks completely insane from the outside, the kind that makes serious, educated, experienced people look at you and say with total confidence that what you are attempting is simply not possible, that you are wasting your time, that you should stop before you embarrass yourself any further. I have been watching human beings for a long time, longer than most, and I can tell you that the people who change things, the ones who actually move the needle on what is considered possible, almost always look exactly like that from the outside, at least in the beginning. They look reckless. They look delusional. They look like someone who missed the meeting where everyone else agreed on the limits of what could be done. Elon Musk has looked like that for most of his public life. And on June 12, 2026, Elon Musk walked onto the Nasdaq Stock Exchange and proved every single one of his doubters wrong in the most expensive, most visible, most historically significant way possible. SpaceX went public. And not quietly, not modestly, not with the kind of careful, managed debut that most companies spend years carefully orchestrating with investment bankers and PR teams and carefully worded press releases. SpaceX went public the way Elon Musk does everything, at maximum volume, maximum scale, and with a number attached to it that most people had to read twice just to make sure they were seeing it correctly. $75 billion. Raised in a single offering. 555 million shares at $135 apiece. The largest initial public offering in the entire history of human financial markets. Not the largest tech IPO. Not the largest American IPO. The largest IPO, period, ever, in the history of money. And the moment those shares started trading on the Nasdaq on a Friday morning in June, while most of the world was going about its normal Friday morning business, they didn't stay at $135. They didn't creep up slowly the way nervous new listings sometimes do. They shot upward immediately, past $150, past $160. The market cap crossed $2 trillion before most people had finished their morning coffee. And in that moment, right there, on a Friday morning in June 2026, Elon Musk became something that had never existed before in the recorded history of human civilization. The world's first trillionaire. One man, one company, more personal wealth than the GDP of most countries on this planet. Even I had to sit down for a minute when I saw that number. But here is the thing about record-breaking moments. They are almost never really about the moment itself. They are about everything that came before it. Every decision, every failure, every morning someone woke up and chose to keep going when stopping would have been so much easier. The $2 trillion valuation on that Friday morning was just the visible part. The part underneath it, the part that actually explains how you get there, is a much longer and much more interesting story. And that is the story I want to tell you today. SpaceX started in a warehouse. One warehouse. In El Segundo, California in 2002, where a small group of engineers and optimists were attempting to do something that the entire established aerospace industry had looked at carefully and concluded was not commercially viable: build fully reusable rockets from scratch, at a fraction of the cost of existing government and defense contractor systems, and use them to fundamentally change the economics of getting things into space. NASA had been working on aspects of this problem for decades. Lockheed Martin had entire divisions dedicated to it. Boeing had teams of some of the most credentialed aerospace engineers in the world studying the same questions. And the consensus among all of these well-funded, well-staffed, deeply experienced organizations was consistent. The kind of cost reductions Musk was talking about were not realistic. The physics worked technically, but the economics didn't. And in the real world, economics matter as much as physics. Musk disagreed, and he put his own money behind that disagreement. Nearly his entire fortune from the sale of PayPal, at a time when most people in his position would have been buying beachfront property and considering an early retirement. SpaceX almost went bankrupt. Not once. 3 separate times in its early years, the company came within weeks of simply running out of money before they had proven the technology could actually work. 3 times, Musk had to make the decision to keep funding the company with money he didn't really have left, against odds that any rational financial analysis would have called unacceptable. 3 times, he made that decision anyway. And then the rockets worked. And then they landed themselves. And then they flew again. Reusable. Recoverable. Exactly as he had said they would be, in the warehouse in El Segundo, when everyone else was explaining patiently why it wasn't possible. That was just the beginning of what SpaceX became. Starlink came next. a constellation of thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit, providing broadband internet connectivity to places that had never had reliable access before. Remote villages in Africa, research stations in Antarctica, ships in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. By 2026, Starlink had become the world's largest satellite internet provider, with millions of active subscribers across every continent on the planet. It was not a side project. It became one of the primary revenue engines of the entire company. Then Musk merged xAI, his artificial intelligence company, the one he founded after leaving OpenAI's board because he disagreed with the direction the field was heading, into SpaceX. He brought X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, into the same corporate structure. In a single transaction in early 2026, SpaceX became something that had no real precedent in corporate history. Simultaneously a rocket company, a satellite internet provider, an artificial intelligence research organization, and a social media platform, all operating under one roof with one CEO and one stated mission that connects all of it together. That mission is Mars. Not as a marketing slogan, not as an aspirational poster on the office wall. The word Mars appears 63 times in SpaceX's IPO filing. In the section that describes what the company actually is and why it exists, Mars colonization is not the bonus objective. It is the primary goal. Everything else, the rockets, the satellites, the AI, the social media platform, is described in the filing as infrastructure for that mission. This is what $2 trillion looks like when you trace it all the way back to its beginning. A warehouse, a mission that sounded like science fiction. 24 years of refusing to accept what the consensus called impossible. And 3 near bankruptcies that could have ended the whole thing before it ever became anything at all. I need you to stay with me through this part because this is the part where most people get confused, where the noise gets loudest and the signal gets hardest to find underneath all of it. The Monday after the IPO, SpaceX stock fell 16% in a single trading day. Then another 5% the day after that. Then another 3.6%. By the time that week was over, approximately $400 billion in market capitalization had evaporated. $400 billion. Gone. In 5 trading days. Now, I want to ask you a genuine question. Was SpaceX a worse company on that Monday than it had been the previous Friday? Did the rocket stop working over the weekend? Did the Starlink satellites fall out of orbit? Did the thousands of engineers working on the Mars mission suddenly decide to go home and never come back? No, nothing about the actual company changed. Not a single thing about the underlying business was different on Monday morning than it had been Friday afternoon. The technology was identical. The revenue streams were the same. The mission was unchanged. What changed was the story that investors were telling themselves about the price. Here is how this works, and I want you to understand this because it applies far beyond stock markets. When a highly anticipated asset becomes available for the first time, whether it is a stock, a property, a limited edition product, anything that people have been waiting a long time to buy, the initial price is set by the most enthusiastic buyers. The people who want it most, who have been waiting longest, who are most convinced of its value. They drive the price up quickly, sometimes dramatically, in the first hours and days of availability. Then the people who bought early and saw their investment double in 48 hours start thinking about locking in their profits. They sell. The price dips slightly. The people watching from the outside see the dip and start to wonder if something is wrong. More selling follows. Financial media publishes articles with headlines like, "Is the SpaceX bubble already bursting?" Those articles get shared. More people see them. More selling follows. And the cycle feeds itself, entirely disconnected from whether the actual company is doing anything differently. This is not a SpaceX story. This is not an Elon Musk story. This is the story of every major IPO in market history. The price spikes. The price corrects. And then the market spends the next several years figuring out what the thing is actually worth based on what the business actually produces. The question that matters is never what happens in the first week. The question that matters is what happens over the next decade. And the answer to that question has very little to do with what the headlines said on that particular Monday in June. I have been present for a lot of significant moments in human history. I have watched powerful people negotiate terms, write contracts, make promises that seemed extraordinary at the time. None of it, not one single compensation agreement I have ever witnessed, comes close to what SpaceX buried inside its IPO filing under the heading of executive compensation. the SpaceX board of directors has offered Elon Musk a performance bonus. 1 billion additional shares of SpaceX Class B common stock. To put that in perspective, at the IPO price of $135 per share, 1 billion shares is worth $135 billion. That is more money than the GDP of most countries. That is a bonus larger than the entire market capitalization of most Fortune 500 companies. One condition: he has to build a permanent human colony on Mars with at least 1 million inhabitants. I want you to read that sentence one more time, slowly. Let every word land individually. A permanent human colony on Mars. 1 million inhabitants. This is not a vision statement. This is not the kind of aspirational language that corporate communications teams insert into annual reports to make shareholders feel good. This is a legally binding compensation structure, reviewed by lawyers, approved by a board of directors, filed with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, and made available to the public as part of the official documentation for the largest IPO in human history. The word colony, as in an established permanent settlement of human beings on another planet, appears in a document filed with a federal financial regulator as a condition of executive payment. And here is the detail that tells you everything you need to understand about how Elon Musk operates. He agreed to these terms. He sat across from his own board, looked at a compensation package that requires interplanetary civilization building as a prerequisite for payment, and said yes. That is the deal he chose. That is the target he is aiming at. The structure itself is worth understanding in more detail. The billion shares do not vest all at once. They are tied to 15 separate market capitalization milestones. SpaceX must hit valuations ranging upward to $7.5 trillion, combined with corresponding human colony milestones on Mars. The shares have 10 votes each, meaning they are specifically designed to ensure that as Musk gets closer to the Mars goal, his control over the company becomes effectively unassailable. The board is not just incentivizing him to reach Mars. They are structurally ensuring that if he gets there, he will have done so as the undisputed decision-maker of the organization that made it happen. There is one more detail in the IPO filing that is worth knowing. Despite owning approximately 82% of the voting power in SpaceX after the public offering, Musk himself cannot sell a single share of his personal stake for 12 months. He is locked in by the terms of his own company's offering. He watched $400 billion in market cap disappear in a week, knowing that regardless of what the price did, he could not sell. He is required, by legal agreement, to remain fully committed to the long game no matter what the short-term noise looks like. That is not an accident. That is a choice, and it says more about his actual intentions than any interview or tweet ever could. All right, you have been patient. You sat through the history, the IPO mechanics, the $400 billion correction, and the Mars colony bonus clause. So let me tell you what I actually think. Not just what happened, but what it means. Because there is a reason I am telling you this story, and it is not because I think you need a finance lesson. Elon Musk is not a perfect man. I want to be clear about that because I know the world is deeply divided about him, and I am not here to recruit you to one side or the other of that argument. He has made decisions that were wrong. He has said things that caused real harm. He has run organizations in ways that made life harder for people who deserved better. I am not asking you to ignore any of that or to decide it doesn't matter. But there is something underneath the controversy, underneath the headlines and the Twitter arguments and the political debates about what he represents. Something that is true regardless of how you feel about him personally. And I think it is worth naming clearly because it is actually rare. Genuinely rare, even among people who achieve extraordinary things. He decided what he was building before he knew if it was possible. He committed to a destination, Mars, a multiplanetary human species, reusable rockets, the whole vision, before he had any real evidence that he could get there. And when the evidence went against him, when the rockets failed and the money ran out and the people he respected told him to stop, he did not adjust the destination. He adjusted the approach. He kept the target fixed and changed everything else around it until things started working. Most people do the opposite. Most people start with a vague sense of what they want, then quietly adjust what they want based on what seems achievable, then adjust again and again until the original ambition has been negotiated down to something so modest it barely resembles where they started. That process feels like wisdom. It feels like maturity and pragmatism and knowing your limits. But very often it is just fear wearing the costume of reason. SpaceX losing $400 billion in market value in 5 days did not change what SpaceX was building. The engineers kept working. The rockets kept flying. The Starlink satellites kept connecting people in remote corners of the world who had never had reliable internet before. The mission remained exactly as it had been described in the filing, 63 Mars references and all. That is the thing I want you to take from this story. Not that you should start a rocket company. Not that you should pour your savings into any particular stock. Not that Elon Musk is someone to model your life after in every dimension. The thing worth taking is simpler than any of that. It is this: when you know what you are building, really know it deeply and specifically, not just as an abstract feeling but as a concrete thing you can describe and measure and work toward, the noise becomes much easier to ignore. The bad week. The people who say it cannot be done. The moment when the price falls and everyone around you starts to panic. None of it changes what you are actually building unless you let it. SpaceX is worth $2 trillion today not because of a good week in June. It is worth $2 trillion because of 24 years of not letting the bad weeks define the destination. Whatever you are building right now, a career, a business, a skill, a relationship, a reputation, that principle applies to you too. The destination does not change because the market had a rough Monday. You keep working. You keep flying. You keep building toward the thing you decided to build, back before you knew whether it was going to work. And if anyone asks you why you are still going when the numbers look bad and the critics are loud and the odds feel impossible, you tell them what SpaceX told the SEC in its IPO filing. You tell them you are building toward something real, something specific, something worth the difficulty of getting there. Then you get back to work. I will see you in the next one.